Hello and welcome to our webinar today, How Glint Drives Success with Lead Routing and Funnel Metrics. Your presenters today are Christine Maxey, the Director of Enterprise Solutions at LeanData, Jim Bell, the Chief Marketing Officer at Glint, and myself, Matt Ostanik. I'm the founder and CEO of FunnelWise. Today our webinar will provide insight on how LeanData and FunnelWise work together to help Glint and other companies successfully drive revenue. When your lead routing strategy is backed by revenue funnel metrics, companies can ensure that truly no leads are left behind. First, Christine will share why lead routing is necessary to build high-performing teams. Then, I will share how funnel metrics can help companies create and evaluate your lead routing strategy. Finally, Jim will share how both of these items are essential to his team's revenue generation efforts. So now I'll hand it over to Christine.
Thanks, Matt. Christine Maxey from LeanData here, and before we talk about specific technologies, I just wanted to take a minute to talk about tech stack synergies. Today, your tech stack is integral to the success of your business operations. We all know that. And the number of available technologies may create confusion as many of the products overlap just a bit, but we hope that you don't feel overwhelmed by that because you should look to your vendors. You should find vendors that are not only eager to work with others, but those who have built a product that works well with others. Buyers should also expect that the vendors have relationships with their peers and maybe even their competition. If they don't, at a minimum, they should be open and eager to learn more to help you drive the most value from both vendors. I know when I work with prospects, one of the first questions I ask them is about the existing vendors or vendors they're considering for their overall lead management strategy, because I'm constantly wondering how I can help drive more value for our clients, help them save money, make money, improve their ROI, improve their relationships, etc. So you should always be curious about the synergies created when implementing two or more vendors. Again, at LeanData, this is a priority for us. We work diligently to establish partnerships with other vendors. I love hearing about how our clients are pairing LeanData with other vendors to help drive value, because having a holistic view and a knowledgeable opinion around overall lead management establishes us as a thought leader and a trusted advisor. So you should always have high expectations of your vendors and keep us on our toes, please. So with that, I'll talk a little bit about LeanData, and then we'll hear from Matt at FunnelWise, and lastly, we'll let Jim from Glint talk about how his forward thinking and expectations around vendor partnerships allowed him to drive more value for his organization. At a high level, LeanData is a managed app within Salesforce. Our goal is to help you easily manage your more complex B2B sales processes and extract the most value out of your sales and marketing spend. So our goal is for you to gain actionable insights to support your strategy and then drive quality interactions with your prospects and clients. So first up, insights. Matching leads to accounts by leveraging multiple data points to result in a highly accurate and highly relevant match. Accounts and leads are core and foundational. Then your lead management strategy, whether it's ABM, geo, predictive, industry, company size, product, partner friendly, whatever it may be, we support that. You need to determine what that is, and we can support that. Mix and match is what I see most commonly here. And lastly, intelligent lead routing. You can automate a lead's assignment or action based on any field on the related account, a related opportunity, or the lead itself. You can route to the related account's owner or opportunity owner. We support multiple round robins, route on update, convert leads to contacts, create accounts, opportunities, merge dupes, etc., so on. So you can imagine as you begin to mix and match any of the criteria and actions, your lead flow can become very specific to your needs and to support those multiple strategies that we talked about above. You know, lead routing is foundational as it connects sales and marketing. Marketing works extremely hard to generate interest and demand, and sales, they really do want to successfully connect your product to the needs of the client. But don't let the connection between the two be stifled or limited by native architecture of the application. A systematically supported process results in trust and high-functioning teams. It's not, you know, marketing gave me bad leads or marketing sales saying sales never followed up on the leads. If we get the right leads to the right person from your company so you can drive those quality interactions with your customers and prospects, That drives a more high-functioning team. And let's be honest, your customers and prospects, they both expect and deserve that. So no matter what you want to do or how often you change your strategy, which it will, we know that, our platform is there to support that. LeanData's next generation lead routing is a trusted source of truth within Salesforce. It has a drag and drop interface and allows high-performing sales and marketing teams to collaborate. You can design multiple flows and easily update your lead routing flow to accelerate your ever-changing sales strategy in real time. Deployment history allows you to maintain a log of your implementation, so have no fear. You can feel protected knowing that nothing is permanent, and you can easily and always fall back to previous flows if you make a mistake or change your mind. And lastly, leverage metrics to gain insights and iterate. I hope that quick overview helped you see how sophisticated lead routing can be. If you can dream it, we can help you create it. So don't let the limitations of the Salesforce architecture limit the way you execute against your strategy. And with that, I'll hand it over to Matt to talk a little bit about FunnelWise.
Now, let me share a little bit about funnel metrics and FunnelWise. I created FunnelWise in 2014. I'm a second-time entrepreneur. I previously had started, run, and exited a successful software-as-a-service business. And I used to get very frustrated with some of the funnel metrics and reporting that I had in my previous business. It was those frustrations that led directly into my creation of FunnelWise as a company and as a product to help others. Let me give you an example. At my previous company, we were power users of Salesforce.com. Both my marketing and my sales organization used it heavily. I could go into Salesforce and I could run reports that allowed me to see lots of details about things that happened yesterday. For example, I could see how many phone calls my sales reps made yesterday, how many demos they completed last week, or I could see how many new leads marketing had created and added to the system over the last month or the last quarter. But what I would get frustrated about was that I could not easily get answers to more forward-looking questions. As the person responsible for our overall business results, I wanted to know not just what happened yesterday, but where we were headed tomorrow. Were we going to hit our revenue goal for this quarter or the quarter after that? And did we have enough things happening higher up in our funnel to get us to those future goals further down the road? The way I used to answer those questions in my previous business is that I would download extensive amounts of data from our CRM and from other tools and build complicated spreadsheet models to try and assess which funnel metrics were most important and which ones would lead me towards a conclusion about where we were headed in the future. Unfortunately, those spreadsheet models were always incredibly time-consuming, and by the time we were finished building them, frankly, they would already be out of date. There'd be new information, something would have changed, and it was a constant process of trying to rebuild them to really understand where we were headed and where we needed to make adjustments in the business as we grew. I created FunnelWise as a company to provide a software solution to help other businesses with addressing this challenge and getting deeper, clearer insights into their funnel metrics. One of the things that I've learned in several years of working with clients across the country now, though, is that there's a definite need in this space for more than just a technology solution. People in both sales and marketing leadership roles also benefit from additional instruction and education around what to do with the information even when they have access to their key funnel metrics. And for that reason, we also created a framework that's called Revenue Funnel Science. There is a book and lots of other information about it available online. And overall, Revenue Funnel Science is a methodology that helps businesses to better analyze their funnel information to determine future outcomes, set goals, and predict revenues. All of that combined to help companies that are utilizing Revenue Funnel Science truly achieve full funnel intelligence. One of the areas where you can apply funnel metrics and Revenue Funnel Science is in shaping your critical strategy for lead routing. A common problem that can occur with lead routing are traffic jams when the lead routing is not working properly, leads not flowing to the right locations or the right people on your team to truly optimize revenue success. But when you utilize the right funnel metrics, they send signals for how your strategy needs evaluated and optimized. When applied properly, your funnel metrics should be holistic. And what I mean by that is they should cover your entire funnel from top to bottom, marketing through sales. And there are several key dimensions that you need to look at to really understand what is happening with your funnel metrics. 4 common building blocks that we talk about with revenue funnel science in particular are, first, measuring volume or net new movement, the actual number of records that are entering each stage in your funnel. You also then look at conversion rates, which are the percentages of leads that are flowing from one stage to the next successfully in your funnel. A third important item is velocity, and velocity is the amount of time that records are spending in each stage. Finally, aging. Aging is an indicator of how long a record or a lead has been sitting in that particular stage of your funnel and allows you to evaluate when they are growing stale, when you need to nurture them, or when additional cleanup of your data is needed as well. When you look at these funnel metrics in the context of your sales organization or individual sales reps, they can give you incredibly important information. For example, looking at how many net new leads or how much movement is occurring for each of your individual sales reps. Also looking at their conversion rates, who is being more successful versus less, velocity, who is taking more time with leads versus less to move them forward, and looking at aging to understand where the bottlenecks are, not just for your overall funnel, but for each of your individual sales teams or sales reps. Ultimately, what you want to do is evaluate your goals and use a reverse engineering process to map out what your funnel metrics should look like in the future. So for example, you can work backwards from a revenue goal, and using these key metrics such as conversion rates and velocity, you can calculate backwards to understand how many leads you need entering your funnel higher up. You want to do this not just for your overall business funnel, but again to break it out by these different key dimensions, such as individual lead sources or campaigns, and certainly by the different sales reps and members of your sales organization. You can utilize that then to develop your optimal lead flow plan to figure out how many leads marketing needs to be feeding to each of those sales reps and when they need to be feeding them to make sure that that sales rep is set up for success with achieving their quota for this quarter, next quarter, or time periods further down the road than that. You can then also use a technique called cross-funnel comparison analysis to evaluate how your funnel is performing and where you might need to make changes in your lead routing strategy. I'll share 2 different examples of this on the current slide and the next slide here. The first one, as you can see on the screen, is looking at conversion rates for a small sales team. This has taken the funnel information and broken it out into 4 subfunnels, or an individual funnel for each of these different sales team members, Joe, Beth, Cindy, and Frank. It's looking at their successful conversion rates from one stage to the next. As you can see, 2 of these team members, Beth and Frank, actually are more successful with conversions than Joe and Cindy are. This may indicate several different things. There could be opportunities for training and coaching with Joe and Cindy to help them improve their conversion rates. Or it may be that the quality of the leads that are being delivered to Joe and Cindy are different than what Beth and Frank are receiving as well. You can dig into the details to try and understand why you're seeing these different patterns. A cross-funnel comparison also shows you that the average conversion rate is 28% across the team. And it causes you to question, what specifically can I do to help Joe and Cindy increase their conversion rates to get them up to that same overall average? If they're able to do that and everything else in their funnel remains the same, then they will produce additional revenue results for the organization, growing your overall sales success. Another way to look at this is also to say, if I have a surplus of leads, or if I have more leads coming in than expected, perhaps I want to route some of those additional ones to my higher performing team members. Instead of just focusing on improving the underperformers, I might also find that I could maximize my revenue success by sending additional leads to those particular sales reps that have the greatest likelihood of success with those individual leads, in this case as shown by their conversion rates here. With each of these strategies, you have to dig further into the details to really understand what the right approach is, but this type of analysis can give you important high-level information to really understand how you should shape your strategy. Another example is when you look at a cross-funnel comparison based on the actual volume or number of leads that each of the sales team members are receiving. In this example, you can see that Joe and Cindy are receiving more leads than Beth and Frank. This would be an example where as a marketing organization, you might want to make sure that you've established lead routing rules to ensure consistency of the actual number of leads that are being delivered across the team. Many marketing organizations measure themselves on an overall MQL goal, for example. Well, it might be nice that you hit that overall aggregate MQL goal, let's say 40 MQLs for that time period. It's also very important to dig into the cross-funnel comparisons to make sure that those leads are being distributed either evenly across the team or, as I mentioned previously, that you're sending extra leads to certain sales team members that might need the additional leads to have the best chance at hitting their quota, or in a different approach, that you're sending additional leads to those sales team members that have the greatest likelihood of success based on their past performance with other leads. All of these types of comparisons allow you to drill into greater detail to make sure that you have the key funnel metrics needed to optimize your lead routing strategy.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to share my experience with you. It's particularly special to share it in the context of two technology partners who've been so reliable and so collaborative in helping us grow our business. A little bit of background, I joined Glint 2.5 years ago. Prior to that, I was CMO at JasperSoft for about 4.5 years until we were acquired. I mention that because my opinions on this topic today are kind of shaped by both those experiences. JasperSoft, our challenge was, as an open source company, we had lots of inbound interest and leads, so the key there was really focusing on the right leads for follow-up. And we, in fact, overhauled our whole demand funnel and ended up doubling our conversion rate from inquiry to close won in a 1-year time frame, which was amazing and exciting and probably a bit lucky. At Glint, I joined a 10-person company. As the first marketer, we had no leads, no marketing campaigns, no website, definitely a different challenge. A quick background on Glint. We help the world's leading organizations increase employee engagement, build stronger teams and managers, and improve business performance. By helping them use pulse surveys and sophisticated data analysis, we help them determine how engaged their employees are, so that mental, emotional, and behavioral commitment to your work that results in great performance and ultimately leads to great business outcomes. And this idea that helping your people be successful really is the primary fuel for business success. Now, at Glint, I've had the pleasure and the challenge of building the demand engine from scratch, which I know in some ways sounds great because you get to sort of do it the way you want. The downside, though, is that there's no one else to blame when it doesn't go right. So one last note about Glint. We're very much a learning organization. We are always analyzing what drives our business, my CEO probably more than anyone else, and analyzing how to improve. And so the need for deep analysis and for optimization is never ending, and it's part of the reason this topic today is sort of near and dear to my heart, and why these two partners have been so instrumental in helping us gain success in this area. I want to talk a little bit about my experience, and the first point I want to make is this idea of using capacity as sort of the key driver for lead score and routing criteria. I think Matt's analogy of traffic jams is a good one. I think about the demand funnel, the demand process, the number one objective for most marketing organizations, which really is building pipeline, as really sort of a dollar in, dollar out process. And so I look at how much are we investing in marketing programs. I look at how many SDRs do we have and what types of sales development folks do we have. I try to understand what are the contributions of those different sort of assets and investments that we're making in terms of an end result that's at least sales pipeline, if not ideally sort of revenue as the outcome at the end of the day. And so capacity really to me is just the management of everything that lives in between, your investment in a marketing campaign or in a sales development rep and the outcome, which for most part, we really do focus on sales pipeline dollars, and we sort of assume that they convert at a pretty consistent rate when you get to close one, and that allows us to look at things in a little bit shorter time frame because we do have, sort of roughly a 6-month sales cycle here. So some questions to ask that I think are really important are how many inbound leads can sales handle and still guarantee follow-up? One of the big things that we saw at JasperSoft was that we had lots of inbound leads, and so coming up with lead scoring and the ability to set that threshold was really important. The problem was the demand and the volume would vary. And so in a given week, in a given month, for a given region, we would not have enough MQLs that, cross that threshold for passing on to a sales development rep or to the sales team to keep them busy. And so what that meant was they had to try to fill their sales pipeline other ways, which usually meant cold calling or prospecting, which they didn't like to do, which, to be honest, they particularly weren't all that great at. And the result was either they didn't do it well, or in a lot of cases, they would spend more time on their existing deals, and they would work on those and not be generating more pipeline. So really there the focus was to stop looking at how many MQLs do we generate, or even necessarily what's the criteria for an MQL, and we decided to begin to use that measure as a way to control volume going through to the sales development team and to the sales team. So we asked them, how many leads can you take a week and still follow the SLAs, make the right number of phone calls and emails when you're following up and you're managing those well. And once we understood that, we then began to move that MQL threshold up and down to regulate volume so it stayed consistent. And so we had a consistent number of leads going through to SDRs and a consistent number of leads that were route arounds that were going directly to the salespeople. Because those interim metrics of number of MQLs, et cetera, really don't mean anything to your business. It's really just a mechanism for sort of adjusting the volume, turning the knob to keep your highly paid resources, your SDRs, your sales reps, busy with the best possible leads you have. So if you lower your MQL threshold score by a point or 2 points or whatever it is, or you increase it when volume is high, all you're really doing is just making sure that they're keeping consistently busy with a regulated volume of the best stuff that you have at the time. And we found that was a huge difference in some of the success in improving our conversion rates at JasperSoft. The second is really to think about the advantage of speed versus quality. And I've got to say, in my career, we've gone back and forth on this one a lot of times, which is, what leads do get routed around to, past the SDRs or directly to an account executive. And really, I've often thought, well, that first touch is so important, so you really want a high-quality first touch, so you want that to be the salesperson. But we also have probably all seen the stats, right, where that first touch, the first responder, has a much higher win rate with those prospects who come in and ask for contact us request or whatever it might be. So I encourage you to look really hard at that question. In general, I've sort of been biased towards the fast response is better, provided you have enough adequate training for that first responder, even if it is a sales development rep or a relatively junior person, to get in touch with that person quickly, understand what they need, and get that meeting set up with the account executive. That's my bias, but I would just, whichever way you go, I'd encourage you to look at that closely. The third is don't forget about the follow-up cadence. It's easy to say, yep, every lead we get, we're going to follow up with 6 phone calls and 8 emails or a LinkedIn request, whatever it might be. Just make sure as you're planning that out that you're laying that over weeks. So if you have a 3-week cadence and each week you have a certain number of calls and emails to send, and a certain number of those leads are going to fall off because they either tell you they're not interested or they move forward, but a lot of them are going to run through that entire 3-week cadence. So sort of layer that cadence out so you have a good understanding and make sure that people are prepared to follow up on the volume of 3 weeks worth of leads that are either in week 1, week 2, or week 3 of that follow-up cadence. And the last one is really about account-based routing. And so I am a big believer, and in my experience, this has worked to really separate inbound and outbound dedicated SDRs. So we call them market response reps as the inbound folks, and then sort of outbound SDRs. And we found, and this is actually one of the reasons we initially got in touch with our friends at LeanData, was that I was talking to this inbound sales development rep who said she was spending so much time trying to figure out who owned that lead. And the lead might be owned by one person. There was actually an account that was related that was owned by somebody else. Trying to figure out, was that an active thing? Was she able to follow up on it, or was she stepping on somebody's toes who might already be talking to that person? And so isolating those two things really helped us get that, and then the intelligent lead routing, so that if something was a target account and having to be sent directly to the SDR associated with that account and the rep associated with that account, prevented that inbound person, that market response rep, from even have to touch it at all. So that was a huge time saver for us. The other, just last, sort of my personal preference around separating these two things is now I can look at the ROI of marketing programs and look at the cost of the campaigns that we run, add in the cost of those inbound SDRs, and know that whatever we generate from those marketing sources, we know what the cost was and we can measure the ROI. In a similar way, we can look at the outbound SDR team and say, okay, what's the cost of that team, and measure their ROI, knowing that they're not being sort of unduly influenced by inbound leads or cherry picking, inbound things versus outbound leads. So not only does it help people specialize and get better at their jobs, but it also helps us sort of measure the ROI of those different groups. So I'm a big proponent of that as well. So sort of in summary, I really am thankful for the opportunity to be a part of this. So thank you both, and a chance to share my experience. And for those who are interested, I'm going to just go ahead and give you my email because I love to learn from all of you. It's jbell, J-B-E-L-L, @glintinc.com. So if you have good ideas to share, I am happy to share mine and steal yours. It's always a secret to getting better, is learning what other people do well. So thank you both. Again, really enjoy this topic and happy to talk more about it. Thank you very much.
So Christine and Jim, thank you for the great presentations. This is Matt again, and that was terrific to hear both of your thoughts on this. Jim, I really appreciate your comment there as well about happy to share your ideas and steal from others as well. That's one of the great things that comes from discussions like this also. We are going to discuss a few questions that we have here from the audience. If anyone listening has additional questions that you would like to submit, please feel free to go ahead and type them in as we're talking here also. But we'll run through a couple of the questions that we've had here already. So Jim, for starters, I was curious, when you're thinking about your technology stack, in particular for managing some of the processes you're describing, how much do you consider the compatibility of various solutions? How does that factor in for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's something I actually don't think about that much. I do, of course, think how do they connect with sort of our core systems, which for us is Salesforce and Marketo, and I think about how they might fit together in terms of some of the core needs or functions that we have. I guess in my mind, there's sort of these foundational sort of components. What's your ideal customer profile? Who are your personas? How do you define a target account, and what does that mean in terms of how you act on it, and what are the key stages in the funnel that you really care about, the ones that are important to your business, that are consistently measured, that help predict sort of revenue going forward. And so I look at how different technologies fit into that, and then I sort of, to a large degree, assume that as long as they can connect into, let's say, a Marketo for the workflow piece, or Salesforce for sort of reporting data together with the sales part of things that ultimately can flow back into FunnelWise, then I don't actually look at that closely. No, maybe that's not maybe that's not right, but that's kind of how I've been thinking about it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I appreciate your honest answer on it. I think, that's still an evolving area in the industry as well, right? There's so many different solutions out there for different needs as a whole. I think there's big opportunities in the years ahead for more and more compatibility and integration between them, but certainly thinking how they connect into your core components, Marketo or Salesforce or other foundations that you're using makes a lot of sense. So that's actually a really good segue to my next question, which is I'm curious to ask you what else you have in your marketing and sales tech stack. We've obviously talked about LeanData and FunnelWise, but what other key items you're using in your particular tech stack for Glint?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I mentioned Salesforce and Marketo, LeanData and FunnelWise, and then sort of depending on how narrow or broad you want to go, we use LeadSpace to kind of track ideal customer profile, do some data enrichment, and some other components around predictive sort of account scoring to help us select our target accounts and those kinds of things. We use our SDRs use SalesLoft Cadence to manage the sort of follow-up process, emails, phone calls, getting that data back into Salesforce. We use Terminus for account-based advertising. So when we sort of initiate a new set of target accounts and our outbound reps are beginning their outreach, we sort of turn on the account-based advertising just ahead of that to help make sure that they have some air cover when they're going in. So I'd say those are probably the primary ones at this point. I may be forgetting some, but I think those are the main ones.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I appreciate you giving us the high-level walkthrough. Interesting to hear about some familiar names there and some other ones that I need to do a little more investigation on to learn about myself. Jim, I was also really intrigued as you were talking about, particularly the inbound and the outbound teams from an SDR standpoint, how you're managing routing with that. And I'm curious to ask you about how you manage the sizing of those teams as well. Like you referred to asking them about capacity and figuring out how many leads to send them. But from a hiring and growth standpoint, how do you make staffing decisions? How do you know how many of those folks and those different types of roles that you need to have? How have you figured that out as you've gone?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is a really tough challenge, but I actually feel like at Glint we've done this sort of better than I've done anywhere else in my career. And that is to sort of really divide up the so I look at our revenue goals and what we're trying to book out, really for 2 years, month by month, and then I sort of work backwards, do some cohort analysis to figure out what's our average sales cycle length, and for us that's kind of 4 to 6 months, and then how long does it take to get from an inbound inquiry to our what we call a qualified meeting, or depending on how you talk about it, a TQL or an SAL. And then to sort of into the sales pipeline. So look at the time lag or velocity for those and the conversion rates for those, and then work backwards to see what is it we need to generate in terms of sales pipeline, kind of initially regardless of what source it comes from. And then from that sales pipeline target, which for us is about sort of 4x, what we're going to need to close in 6 months, let's say, how are we going to get there? And so there's the marketing generated stuff, and that's going to come from, primarily from marketing program dollars. So there's fixed costs in marketing around headcount and infrastructure and those kinds of things. But generally speaking, the more you spend on marketing programs and events, the more leads you should generate that should turn into pipeline. So kind of look at what's the cost per lead, or the cost per sales qualified lead ultimately from marketing programs. And then I see, all right, well, what's the gap between that and the goal? And so then I do the same exercise with the number of outbound SDRs. So the question is how much, and we've been able to learn this over time, how much can they generate in sales pipeline per month? And then we look at how much other pipeline do we get from sales reps themselves or from referrals and things that sort of aren't associated with either an outbound SDR or a marketing campaign. So roll all that up, kind of see what the gap is between what we think we can generate and what our goals are, and then use that to see, hey, do we need to put more money into marketing programs? Do we need to add another outbound SDR? and we have the relative costs of those things, so we can begin to sort of plan it out from there. And that might tell us, hey, if we think the marketing budget is kind of maxed out in terms of marginal return, then we need to add another SDR, and we need to do that, X number of months ahead of time to make our plan. So it's kind of this complicated mix of stuff, and this is a great area where FunnelWise has helped us kind of understand better sort of that sourcing and allocating, so we can kind of look at the relative ROI of each of those sort of major sources.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Yes, a lengthy but very thorough answer, and I appreciate you taking the time to walk us through all the steps of that.
Sorry about that. I have a little bit of passion in this area, yeah.
No, it's perfect. And I also appreciate your comment at the beginning that maybe you've, at Glint, handled this the best you've handled it in your career as well. I mean, this is something many companies struggle with as well, right? Because it's not an easy thing to get all of that correct, for sure. So
no, so many places, right? It's the CFO tells you how much budget you have, and then often, they or your CEO tells you what you need to generate, and you're sort of stuck. So I do appreciate the ability to have a bigger hand in that process.
Makes sense. Jim, one more question for you. I've got a couple of questions for Christine following that, but while I've got you talking here at the moment, can you give us any sense on the time savings and maybe the compare and contrast with the automated lead routing, how that saves time for your sales team, but also just a little bit more on, what it was like before you had that, either at Glint or in previous companies, versus having more of the automation around the lead routing today?
Yeah, and I apologize, the fan in this conference room I'm in just went on very loudly, so hopefully it won't be too bad. I don't know that I have an exact measure. I do know that that sort of initial challenge of trying to figure out where leads belonged and whether the market response rep could follow up on it was probably with hours per week, and that was with a small team and with one person. So as that scales up, I couldn't tell you exactly, but I guarantee you it's hours per week that were being wasted trying to figure out what belonged where. Partly from duplicate records and things that weren't getting associated correctly, and partly from just not knowing the system, not knowing what was a target account, and so how to get that inbound lead, even if it wasn't somebody who was already in our database, to the right person who was already actively working that account. It's definitely hours per week, so it's significant.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it's great to hear your real-world testimonial on that in terms of how that's actually working as well. Christine, I've got a question for you here as well. I guess I was curious from your perspective, why is lead routing important to understanding what's happening in your funnel? What have you seen with that?
Yeah, no, this is a great question. I think it's important to know, and I think it's very clear that everyone's funnel is different. And waiting until the end of the quarter, the end of the year to kind of look at your funnel and what's happening is just not good enough, right? If the metrics are bad, then there might be a blame game. And if they're good, you're thinking, why didn't we see this sooner, and how could we have accelerated, our pipeline based on our funnel, earlier. And so it goes back to those metrics, right? And kind of to Jim's earlier point, when you have those metrics, as you see them moving, movement in the metrics is really, really key to driving conversations around what's happening, what's driving that movement. So I think it's important to drive all the value you can out of what marketing is doing, and not in a backwards fashion, more kind of forward-looking and really driving the most value you can from your marketing initiatives.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I wholeheartedly agree with that as well. One more question that we've got here, and then I think we're coming up on our time limit, but actually two questions submitted as one. Any suggestions on how to build out org charts for large accounts, and can you tie a lead to another lead within the same account? Christine, what are your thoughts on that?
Another good question. We absolutely, from a LeanData perspective, can tie leads to other leads from the same account, whether the account exists in Salesforce today or does not. So first is having the insight into, let's say it's an account that exists, so all of the contacts and all the leads, then your marketing team, your sales development team can fill the gaps, not just for where they're missing contacts, but when they see the leads, maybe they have some of the contacts already, but the gaps between the two, where don't we know between the leads and the contacts, who at the account, who are we missing, who do we need to reach out to? And that just ties into the second question there, which was, can we tie the leads to other leads from the same account? Yeah, let's say that the account doesn't even exist. This is net new, and that's really important to a company, not just what you know, what you don't know. And tying leads to other leads within the same account, super important and absolutely something we can do.
Great. No, it's terrific to hear. Thank you. Well, I think we're about at our time limit for the presentation and the Q&A today, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. We really appreciate everyone for joining us for our webinar today on lead routing and funnel metrics. Christine, I really appreciate your time and expertise, and Jim, thank you so much for being here to participate with us and really sharing a lot of detail about how you're managing these programs at Glint. It's been terrific to work with both of you on this.
Thanks for including me.
Yeah, sorry to break in on you, Matt. Just a quick plug. I'm having a blast here at Glint, but I do need a head of demand gen. So if there's somebody great out there, email me. Thanks.
You guys heard it for our audience. Definitely let Jim know with any referrals on that. And again, Jim and Christine, appreciate you both taking time for this today as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.